What are the questions?
How many children do you have?
Not quite, no.
How many pets do you have?
Not pets.
How many ears do you have?
No, not ears. No. This welcome everyone. Today we've got a couple of teachers from around the world. James from the States, he's an English teacher, of course. Adalet and Rosalind teaching English, both from South Africa, and Marco from Italy, teaching Italian, obviously. So today we are talking about what to do in our first lesson, or what to do at the start of a lesson. We're talking about warmer activities, getting to know you activities, you know, these kind of interactive fun games that you can play either with a brand new student to get to know them, or maybe at the beginning of a lesson in order to kind of break the ice, get people talking, whatever. So I've got a few thoughts of my own, but I'd like to maybe open it up to you guys to ask James, Adalet, Rosalind, Marco, if anyone would like to go first and tell us a little bit about, you know, their favorite warmer or get to know you activities that you sometimes use.
Okay. Well, two things. I think there's two questions here. When I first meet a student, I always have a series of questions that I ask every student. Number one, so that I hear because I want to know the information, but also I want to listen to their speaking. So I always ask them, you know, like, where are you from? What is your native language? How long have you studied English? What is the hardest thing about learning English? Why do you need to improve your English? And along the way, I'm gauging their level. Okay. And then, but to start a lesson, I normally do like all teachers do. I do a warm up where we speak. We just do a little. We do some kind of speaking practice. Like I watched Marco's lesson. And he did an activity that I love, which is describing pictures. And I love that activity. I think it's a great activity. I like to get the student to describe the picture to me. And along the way, I reinforce that you start with there is or there are. You use the present continuous to talk about the activity. And so I'm want them to describe the things to me. Normally there's a word for something they don't know, so they learn a word. I also make sure that they're describing everything to me in complete sentences, and I'm giving their feedback on all of their grammar, all that. So I really love describing pictures. That's one of my favorite. But also, most of my lessons, have a vocabulary activity at the beginning. And so that's normally a good place to start, because I like to have the students talk about the words before we do like the matching. I say, what do you think that word means? What do you think that word means? And then I get them to explain it to me, because I also think explaining things is a good way to learn speaking, to practice speaking. And then a lot of my lessons, I break the lessons up into two parts, 2 1-hour lessons. So at the beginning of the second lesson, I'll review the vocabulary from the first lesson. And I like to do an activity called You're the Teacher. And I tell the student, okay, these are the vocabulary words that we learned at the beginning of our last lesson. And for the next 5 minutes or 7 minutes, you're the teacher. I want you to teach me these words. You need to tell me the part of speech, tell me the meaning of the word, and give me an example in a sentence. And then I'll ask them questions about the word. I'll be like, okay, so can that word be an adjective? Is that a countable noun or an uncountable noun? Or is that a regular verb or an irregular verb? Like that. And so again, I'm always making sure that they're using complete sentences, and I'm giving their feedback on their vocabulary and all of those things. And the third thing I like to do is just general questions, Ian, I was watching your video, and you did a lesson on remote working, okay? And I have a lesson about that too. I have actually a few lessons about that. And so I always ask them the same questions, like, what are your experiences in remote working? Did you like it? What are the advantages or disadvantages of remote working? And so those are the kinds of warm-up activities I do.
You said that you do that kind of describing a picture, and I mean, the picture obviously is related to the subject of the lesson, I guess, right? It's somehow, if you're talking about remote work, it's a picture of someone working at home or something like that.
Exactly, right. But I also do have a few times to give the students a break from that structure. I'll have a lesson for where an hour we just look at pictures. Okay. And they're just like interesting pictures that I find on the internet, and I have sets of them. And we do the same thing. They have to describe the picture to me as if I can't see the picture, and then we talk about it. I ask them to use their imagination to make up stories about the pictures and things like that. But yeah, normally the picture is related to the lesson topic that we're doing.
I think that's I've done similar stuff with kind of spot the difference, right? Where you give them one picture that's incredibly similar to yours, and the idea is that you've got to like describe it to each other in order to find the differences in the picture. And like you said, it's really good with countable, uncountable nouns, about using, present simple, present continuous to describe things that they can see and actions that are happening. And I think that's a great activity to do at any point in the lesson. But I think to start with, if you use it at the start, not only does it immediately get them speaking, but also, I guess you can kind of gauge their level of knowledge. If they have no idea about how to explain what's in the picture, you know that you've got to drill some vocab throughout the lesson or whatever. So, yeah, I like it.
I have
Marco,
one
you have
question. Yeah, I have a question for James. But do you use this kind of description activities no matter whether it's an individual or a group class? Because, I mean, group classes, maybe they are just individuals, right?
Yeah, I've never done that with a group lesson.
Yeah, because might be not too much structured, and for low level could be tricky,
Yeah, right.
I think I've just to add to that, I've done this kind of spot the difference picture description in a group, but in a physical school, in an in-person lesson. That way you can walk around, you can monitor the groups, kind of works. But online, I think in a group, it's not going to work. Adalet, you had a question, I think.
Yeah, or just something to add, since we're talking about picture descriptions, when I've done this in the past, I quite enjoy adding a few fun or silly pictures in between, just to keep things kind of light, even when the topic, isn't that light. It's nice to just put something in there that, relaxes the students and let them have fun. And James, you said about students using their imagination, and a really nice question is to ask them what happens next. So, look at the picture and then tell me, what do you think is going to be the outcome of what you see? And that really gets students talking, and I quite like doing that. So just there's something to add.
Yeah, like I have a picture that I like to show students in one of my sets of pictures. I have like 10 sets of pictures, right? And in one set, there's a little girl who's looking at a bear in like a zoo through some glass. And I always, they describe the picture to me, and then I say, so what do you think the little girl is thinking about the bear? What do you think the little girl understands that the bear is dangerous? And then I ask them, so what do you think the bear is thinking about the little girl? And then that kind of can lead to a discussion about zoos. Well, how do you feel about zoos? I mean, do you think that it's right to have this bear in the zoo? I mean, is it really a good idea for this girl to be so close to a bear, and maybe she doesn't understand that the bear is deadly? Like things like that. So those are like jumping off points for a conversation, right?
And they can also be kind of jumping off points for specific grammar practice as well. Like if you ask them to hypothesize about what happened before that picture was taken, then it can lead into like, oh, they might have done this, they could have done that, this might have been happening, something like that. So yeah, I think these pictures are a great activity. Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing. You also discover things about students. Okay, like one thing that a lot of students have trouble describing is the positions of people's bodies. Like they always have trouble, like when you have a picture of somebody holding something, they never say he's holding a remote. They say he's taking a remote or he's having a remote or something like that. So then you find out that they don't know how to express that idea. And then you can say, okay, no, he's holding the remote. Right? And little things like that maybe you don't find out until you hear them try to say it.
All right. So, I mean, so we're talking about, activities that we do at the start of a class or with a new student, warmer activities, get to know you activities to get people speaking. Maybe Adalet, Rosalind, or Marco, one of you guys would like to share the activities that you often employ.
I can go next.
Go ahead, Adalet. Yeah.
I don't actually it depends a lot on the kind of lesson. So if it's a trial lesson, it would be very different from, just an average lesson, I would say. So in the case of a trial lesson, I actually don't do anything too fancy. I want the student to be at ease. So, I ask a few questions. James mentioned a few obvious questions that you're, of course, going to ask the student about, where they're from and how long have they been studying English and those kinds of things. But I also want to put them at ease. So I try to find some common ground, which I find to be really helpful for me, because then, you can build on that and you want to sort of start a relationship with the student from, the beginning in terms of getting to know them and what's their language journey looking, or what has it looked like up to this point, and what are they expecting for the future. But and then what I like to do is I have also a list of questions that I ask them that gets me to test some language points. So maybe grammar points that I want to know, can they handle this? So, do you prefer cold weather or hot weather? Or where did you grow up? And that helps me, see, okay, can they handle the past tense? Can they talk about preferences? Have you ever, then I'm seeing, can they, handle the present perfect? And finally, after, and that just sounds like a discussion to them. They don't know that I'm, of course, trying to gauge their level, but then I do explain that to them afterwards. I said, okay, I've asked you all these questions, but I didn't just ask you random questions. I've been, sort of assessing you. And I think students quite like that, because they feel like, oh, actually, okay, we're not just chatting. I'm, looking for things. And so that's something that I usually do in a trial lesson.
So that gives you the ability to correct mistake, like specific aspects of for example, if they make a mistake with present perfect, you can correct it, which then obviously, like you said, tells the student oh, okay, we're not just chatting. You're paying attention to the grammar I'm using and you're correcting me. And yeah.
But I'm also sort of starting a file on them, I suppose, right? So now I know, okay, this student can handle the past perfectly, but they struggle with the present perfect. So in our upcoming lessons, that's something I need to focus on. So then I can, assess what they need in the future, and that will help me, help them. So it's not just for that moment, but yes, it's something that can help me sort of identify weaknesses in their language, and then I can assist with that. And so because I specialize mostly in grammar with adults, this is something that, of course, from the very start, I want to see, where are your weaknesses? And that has worked well for me. And when I've had the student for a while, I suppose I will have other warmers, of course, that I do. And something I really enjoy is some general knowledge questions that kind of, get students thinking and talking. They might not know the answer, and there is no pressure for them to know the answer, because there's, how should they know some of these things, which can be quite fun for students because they don't feel like put on the spot that they have to have an answer or know how to do this thing, because it's something that they either will know or won't know, but that will lead to discussion. And that's something that's quite fun for me for a warmer for other lessons.
I think, I mean, and these questions that you ask that are like specific kind of have some kind of grammar focus, they're always the same in every lesson, or it's free flowing, you just do it naturally, or you have a list of them that you always go through, the same ones?
For my trial lessons, I have a list of about 10 questions that I almost always use. But of course, I adapt it to the student depending on their level. And because I have to also gauge that at the beginning when we're just getting to know each other. Maybe some of these questions are too hard, maybe already, right? So I already know that. So I could maybe only ask 2 or 3 of them, or I have to make them a bit easier, or I can, make them harder. So I feel like I have about 10 questions, but they can, be scaled up or they can be simplified depending on what I'm seeing.
Let me ask a question to you.
Yeah.
Adalet, how in your trial lessons, when you first meet a student, how like aggressive are you about error correction? I know you said you do give feedback, but do you start off right away doing your in a normal, like you would in a normal lesson straight off the bat, or do you kind of hold back a little bit to see what their tolerance is for feedback?
Yes, maybe I don't want to overwhelm them. That's true. So first I want to get to know them a little bit, and then maybe about halfway through I start giving more and more feedback. And sometimes also I just put things in the chat box without actually saying to start off softly, right? Okay, here's some, and then I'd say, oh, as you can see, I've been putting some things for you into the chat box, and I always like to do that, and I'll share it with you after the lesson. But sort of, and then once they're aware of that, then maybe start giving more verbal feedback as well. But I sort of do ease into it. How about you, James?
It's about the same. But I try to introduce them to the feedback as soon as possible, because I give feedback and they have to get feedback to learn. And but I try to do it in a way that's not going to, like you said, overwhelm them in the beginning. And like you, I put a lot of notes in the chat log, in the chat box. And I always tell them at the beginning, now make sure you open the messages and follow me in the chat box, because that's where I'm going to give you some feedback, and you'll have these notes for later. You can review them. Yeah, and also because in like a trial lesson, I really am trying to listen to them more, but I want to show them that I give feedback, and that's part of the lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's kind of important to choose a activity or something you can do in your first lesson that will allow you that possibility to correct grammar. Because I feel sometimes if you just talk of like, hey, what's your job? Where are you from? Where did you go on holiday last time? If there's no structure to it, I feel like sometimes you forget to listen to and correct grammar because you're too busy thinking about what your next question is going to be, or you're too involved in the discussion. So to have like a picture exercise like James was talking about, or Adalet, the list of questions or whatever, the kind of focused, it allows you to then concentrate on their response. And then you don't need to worry about what you're going to say or what you're going to ask next. So yeah, I like it. Yeah, Rosalind?
Yeah, just in terms of starting a lesson like with a warmer or whatever, if it's a student I know very well, often there's a little bit of kind of casual chat for a minute or two, the how are you or whatever, and then we introduce whatever we're going to do. So that's certainly for a student that I've been working with for quite a long time and so on. But with a new student, then usually I've got some kinds of questions. A student so I'm not talking about a trial lesson here, I'm just talking about a regular lesson. So then I'll say, okay, we're doing this today, and then there'll usually be some kind of questions about, about the topic. What do you know about this, or have you ever done this, or that kind of thing to get them speaking. And then and then I also like using pictures as well. It's just either describe the picture, what do you see happening here, or or what kind of feelings is this, if this person. I really like it was James that said the one with the bear. Looking at that bear, what is the child thinking, or whatever, that kind of thing, that type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. But on error correction, and just I struggle with error correction in sorry, I struggle with error correction in quite a like exactly when is the right time to do it. That's a question I'm asking everybody, because I kind of find sometimes I overwhelm the student, like, oh, and they go, did I make another mistake, or that kind of thing. So how does everybody do that with it, and it's to be kind?
I would say that, okay, if today we talk about warm-up activities, so I mean, I guess in different kind of the lesson, in different moment of the lesson, we can do correct, but I would be really, really soft in warm-up activities, which are, I mean, today's topic. I would be really soft because, I mean, people are entering the class, maybe coming from different perspective. They had a difficult day, they have something, so they want to enter the idea of being there. They have to get acclimated to that. I mean, get a bit the idea of being there, and straight away, I mean, getting something like, okay, too serious, I wouldn't do that. I mean, I normally don't do that, and I'm always conservative in terms of, I mean, let it go, because it's like a warm up. So, okay, can be mistakes. People are still a bit here, but, or I mean, still there where they were before. And so, yeah, I would reformulate, like rephrase in English, maybe. Yeah, rephrase. Yeah, rephrase. If it's something that I think it's really important, like a target for that level, that student, but I wouldn't, I mean, yeah, we'll keep it really quiet, soft in that
I mean,
moment.
to add to that, Marco, I think in a trial lesson or a first lesson, during the beginning stages, the warmer part of that lesson, then generally I don't correct at all, unless the student is kind of fishing for corrections. Sometimes students, when they're speaking, you can see that they're not sure what to say, and they're looking at you like, is it this word or that? How? And then I would, of course, offer them a correction. But yeah, generally for the warmer, the beginning of the class, and this is every class, regardless of first or not, regardless of individual or group, there's no correction. And then usually what I would do especially a trial lesson, is after this kind of warmer, this kind of just get to know you kind of activity, then I would explain to the student, like, okay, now we're going to do something else. I'm going to ask you a list of questions like Adalet, or I'm going to give you this picture to describe like James. And I might correct you if you make some mistakes, but please don't be offended. Just let them know that it's going to happen. And I would say, as a general rule, if it's a first lesson, then I want them, the first like 20% of the lesson, I just want them to relax and enjoy. Then I want like a sort of chunk in the middle where we're doing some kind of activity that I've prepared, where I give them some advice, some corrections. And then the last 10% of the lesson, I also just want it to be talking and no corrections whatsoever. So if it's a first lesson and I can correct them 2 or 3 times in the middle chunk of the lesson, then I think for me that's okay. Once you get to know the student, obviously it's a bit different, because then you build up a rapport with them, and you know like whether or not how they take correction and criticism. And yeah. So That's what I would say.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one thing sometimes you have to choose your battles. Like Marco said, sometimes maybe in the warm up you want to hold back a little bit and just let the student start speaking and warm up. But with some students, there are some errors that I absolutely do not let them make without being corrected. Like with some students, it's articles or singular or plural nouns or saying the S's at the ends of words. Some students, because I know that that's a tendency, that's a problem, when they make that error, I always correct it, no matter what. But other things I can let go. So like you have to choose what's important, what your priorities are, I guess. And the context, the situation, like Marco said, maybe in the warm up, okay, just let them speak. Okay, but if they don't use an article, then I make that correction, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Adalet,
Yeah, I think when it depends a lot, right, on whether I already know the student or not. So if it's a student and I've identified some problems, then of course I will always make those corrections as soon as I hear them, because that's something we want to rectify. But if it is a new student, then I probably also will be more relaxed about it initially. Of course, I will give them feedback so that they understand that this is going to happen. But of course, also in every trial lesson, I talk to my students about what they actually expect and want from their lessons. So they might also be the kind of student that wants to chat but don't want too much correction because it throws them off. And I find students will tell you that if you check in on them. And I guess if it's a conversation lesson that they're after, I might have a different style in correcting, depending, or if it's a grammar lesson. So it really depends on the student and the situation a little bit. But I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good topic for another. We can have a whole discussion on error correction, how we can correct, when we can correct, how much we can correct. But I want to come back to what we're talking about today, which of course is what we do at the start of the lesson, these warmer activities, get to know your activities. And maybe Marco, you have something you'd like to share with us. You're of course teaching Italian, but still it's language teaching, same thing, just
Yeah.
different language.
Sure. Yeah, so basically, what I would say is that, I mean, as I've been teaching for some years, I noticed that, okay, at the beginning, maybe I would be really innovative in finding ways, finding games, finding activities. But then I understood that maybe keep the classics, the legends, like some basics, something really simple but really effective would help students and give less protagonism to the teacher. So, as a warm-up activity, something that I guess it's really classic that everyone maybe did. I would say for like lesson one, no matter the level, any group or individuals, of course, it's more interesting in groups, but could be also in individuals. If I'm offline, I can draw in the on the blackboard like a flower. In every petal, I put a word concerning myself, my bio, and then I ask students to ask questions like, okay, what do you want to ask? Which word is interesting for you? Okay, why? Which question would you like to go? I don't know. I write, I don't know, climbing. And so the student can ask, I don't know, which kind of sport do you practice, or do you like nature? I don't know, whatever. And this way, I show them that I'm open to share, which for me is really important because I want that this message pass to them. And then I ask to do the same. If they are offline, to ask to draw a flower, do the same, put some words, and then in couples or small groups, they can give questions to each other. Of course, this is good, saying that they set boundaries. They said, I want to speak about this. I'm ready to speak about this. Don't be do not enter to some places where I don't want to share now in this moment at the first class. Online, okay, I can do that. I normally create a Google slide. I give the link. Everyone gets his slide. So I put the name. Everyone has the slide. They can edit. Everyone put his word, and then they do the same. Basically, it's something like that. Sometimes I use also Mentimeter or some polls resources platform. So basically, they type their words and they pop up in the screen that I share. It's a bit more wow effect, but yeah, the idea is the same. Sometimes I can do some variation. Maybe I ask to write 5 words and 6 information. 3 are true, 3 are false. And then in groups they have to guess. Like, okay, I think that this is true because you wrote this word, so I think that yeah, might be related to this. And this can be a variation. For higher level, so let's say yeah, B1 plus B2 C level, I can, for example, pick up so in the calendar, today is the day of Earth. I don't know, for example. I propose in a Google slide 2 quotes and I put them in groups in order to discuss. I mean, maybe 2 quotes which are a bit like different. So agreeing, not agreeing, probably not agreeing with that, and why. And in this way, like in a more abstract and metaphorical way, they share meanings, they share something about themselves. But of course, it is a level which is a bit higher, so B2 C level for sure, B1 plus, it depends which is the group. And so starting from, yeah, the reality, something like that. And sometimes with A2, B1, just as a warm-up activity, I describe like, okay, like what I see out of my window. And I ask them to describe to the classmates what do they see. If we are talking about house, about the city, about, I don't know, environment, about like problems or not, or like advantages of cities, of living in countryside and so. But it depends, of course. But I always try to start from their reality, what they have around. I mean, what I wanted to say at the beginning is that at the beginning, when I started teaching, I was used to go to the class with lots of stuff, materials, always ready for different scenarios because I was not expert. I couldn't like follow like this flowing. But now I start to focus on the students and start from them. That's the material for warm-up activities. Yeah.
I think I like the idea of I do a very similar task, very similar activity with this kind of the information about you, and they ask you questions, and you usually get the students to then repeat the activity themselves, right? And I guess even with a one-on-one class, even online, they could just send their words in the chat or something. So it's pretty versatile.
Can I add? So Marco said something. He likes to open up with some quotations, and I like that too. I like to have a few quotations that are related to our topic, and that we read and we talk about them, or idiomatic expressions. I think that's a good warm up. Also, some idioms that are related to our topic. I think that's a fun way to start this.
Yeah, I agree. I said earlier that I do sometimes ask general knowledge questions, but of course, those are often also related to the topic of the day. Um, but something that I enjoy doing with my students as a warmer sometimes is would you rather questions that everybody seem to enjoy, and um, you can kind of change them. You can make them really silly, or you can make them not silly at all, right? Depending on how serious your student is as well. And those also have worked well for me for warmers.
And I think that those kind of quotations or those specific questions or whatever that are related to the topic, they're a great way to begin a lesson with a student that you know and have seen many times, and then lead into that topic. So very often what I will do, I very often read articles with my students kind of in the lesson. And if, for example, the article is about, I don't know, electric vehicles or something, then maybe I would start with a statement that said, if you're going to buy a new car, you should buy an electric vehicle. Agree or disagree, right? Or something like this. And just some kind of, or electric vehicles are the future or whatever. And then you just have a bit of chat around that. And then that leads into the article that you've got. So it kind of starts in a light-hearted way, and then you can be like, right, now this is the topic I want to focus on. Now we're going to read this article, we're going to look at the vocab, the grammar, whatever. So I think, yeah, those kind of starting with a quote or a question or a statement that you can then agree, disagree with, discuss, I think is great, especially for higher levels. Like obviously for A1, A2, it's much more difficult, but once you get to B1, B2 level, and yeah, it's possible. I thought about things that I do and I have been doing for some time, and I've chosen 3 kind of activities that I think, and I've chosen them because I think they're good in situations when you have no knowledge about that student. So when it's a new student that has booked a trial lesson with you and hasn't really communicated with you. I think they're also very versatile activities, and you can use them as a warmer, you can use them to get to know the student, you can use them to check grammar. And the other reason I've selected them is I think that they're very good for getting students to practice asking questions, which I think is an undervalued part very often of people's language study. And finally, I think they're good for checking people's level. So I've prepared a very simple kind of presentation, I guess, and I'd like to share with you guys. And I mean, if you have any questions throughout it, just stop me and ask. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the first one, I mentioned this last week. The first one I call 4 important numbers. And I think this is a good game to gauge the level of a new student and figure out how talkative and how confident they are. So I give the student 4 numbers, which have some significance to me and my life. And the numbers I usually give them are 2007, 21st of July, 2, and 2016. And then, of course, I ask them to ask me questions and find out about these numbers. So things like, you know, why is 2007 important to you? What happens on the 21st of July? Things like this. And then I would ask them to ask follow-up questions for each date. So why is 2007 important for you? Maybe I'd say it's the year my favorite album was released. And then, of course, they can ask what album was it. And then the idea with this is that I then ask the student to provide 4 numbers of their own, and I ask them. And if you can get them to prepare them before the class. And I think it's just quite an easy way to just generate a little bit of speaking, to get them to answer and ask questions. And you get to know each other a little bit that way as well, right? You get to know a bit about each other's lives, things like this. So this is something I use fairly often with new students. And yeah. And then Adalet, you have a question? I saw you.
And no, but this is really great, and I've done something similar in a classroom setting where, but not just with numbers. So you know, maybe I have my age and a number and a color and or something, and then the students have to guess, right? What is this thing, or and how does it relate to you? So maybe green, and then they were like, "Oh, that's your favorite color," and then you say, "Oh no, actually, it's my least favorite color," or you know, something to. But it reminded me, sorry, of something I've done, but this is great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's funny you should say that, because my next activity that I wanted to share was guess the question. And it's very similar to what you said, what Marco said. But I use this very often because it can be good for individuals and groups. You can adapt the level almost, you know, on the spot. You can again give it as a kind of homework task before the lesson, and you can use it to test different aspects of grammar. So what I would do is I would explain to them that I was recently interviewed by a local newspaper or something, obviously, because I'm an amazing teacher. And then I'd give them the answers to the questions that they asked me. And as an example, you know, I give some that are very easy. So 36, yes, I have 2, Preston, UK, a vet. And then I'd start to make a few more that are a lot more difficult. And again, you can change these as you go. So I'd say something like geography, about 2 hours per day. I try to do it 3 times a week, but usually I only manage to do it twice. A bungee jump in South Africa, things like this. And then I get them to guess the question. This used to work very well in groups when you can get people to work together and guess what the question is, but you can do it, you know, one-on-one as well. And you can decide if you want them to get the question grammatically correct or not. But of course, then the idea is the questions that they've asked, the questions that when you give them the questions, then you use those questions to ask the same thing to the student. So here, the questions you can probably guess are, well, I don't know. What are the questions? Maybe you can guess. Some are probably pretty
How
easy.
old are you?
Yes. How old are you? Pretty easy.
How many children do you have?
Not quite. No.
How many pets do you have?
Not pets.
How many ears do you have?
No, not ears. No. This one is how many.
How many students?
Well, I hope more than 2. But yeah, no, it's how many siblings do you have?
Nice.
Okay.
Which is a great question, because very often with English students, no matter their level, people are like, siblings? What's a sibling? And then you've already taught them a word. Preston,
where were you born?
Not quite. No.
Where did you study?
Yes. Where did I study? Where did you go to university? Yeah. A vet.
What did you want to be when you grow up?
Perfect. Yes, Rosalind, what did you want to be when you grow up? So you can do it in a group class online as well, right? I mean, this is how you would do it. Geography, the question is, what did you study? About 2 hours a day. Here, the question was, how much do you read, or how often do you read, or how much time do you spend reading? This one, I always try and put something in that could be a little bit, you know, weird or whatever. Yeah, a little bit racy. But this is how often do you exercise, or how often do you go to the gym, you know? And a bungee jump in South Africa,
What's
the
the
question
craziest experience you
craziest
done?
thing, the scariest
The most
thing,
terrifying.
yeah, something like that. And then those questions, then you use to ask the student. If it's a one-on-one class, I'd usually go one by one. So I'd get the question and then ask them. I'd probably skip the how old are you, because it's a bit direct. But I use this a lot as well if I'm reviewing grammar that we've done in a previous class. So for example, if we did conditional structures in a previous class, maybe I put my answer here and say something like, if I had that much money, I would travel around the world. And then they've got to formulate the question of what would you do if you had lots of money or something. So yeah, and then you use them to discuss with the student. So there's that one. And then I'm aware that maybe some of us have lessons. So very quickly, the other one is the similar different game, which is, this is usually for higher levels. And it's good for sort of provoking some detailed discussion. So I'd explain to them that I'd like to assess their speaking level and also get to know them a little bit so I can plan the lessons. And then I would explain that I'll give them a topic and we've got to ask each other questions and have an open discussion to find out whether we're similar or different in that area. And then the prompts would be things like our free time activities, our views on social media, our connection to world events, our work-life balance, our attitudes to relaxation. And this would allow me and the student to ask a wide range of questions and just have a very free-flowing conversation. At the end of it, we can say, okay, we're quite similar, we're quite different, whatever. This you can work, it works really well if you add a role play to it and you assign the student and you say, well, you're not you're a 16-year-old kid from America or something. What would you say to these things? Or you're a 75-year-old English man or whatever. So yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen, but there's some of the things that I do at the start of the lesson or sometimes with the new students, sometimes at the start of the lesson. But yeah, so.
Those are really fun. Thanks for sharing.
Very good.
I think, Ian, this one, I mean, you have really to know the group if you want to do it as a role play and assign roles, because they have to be really imaginative, the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they speak about themselves, okay, but if no, give roles, and I think some people might have problems in imagining how could answer a person like this, like that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of those things are very good with just individual students, and you can just do it one-on-one and whatever. I mean, the ones that I use the most are these numbers, and then the guess the question. Those ones can be quite good in a group class online when they're guessing the question. The only problem is that we're very good at deciding when we should speak and who should speak. In a group class, everyone will just shout out. So you have to start it by saying, okay, remember guys, we can raise our hand on Zoom or we can unmute ourselves or whatever. But, another thing you can do in a group class just very quickly is with those questions, what you could do if it's online is you could just say, okay, here's questions about me. You do one as an example, then you give them another 5 or 6. You send them to different breakout rooms and you give them a task. They have to, first of all, introduce themselves to each other, and then they have to come up with the questions they come back and share with the other group and see. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, maybe this is all we've got time for today, but I think it's been quite fruitful. I mean, has anyone got any other questions or anything they'd like to add? Questions, points?